I watched my own son spit on his mother's casket, right there, in front of everybody. The pastor had just finished speaking. The wind was pulling at the flowers on top of the mahogany lid. 200 people sat in white folding chairs on the lawn of Greenlawn Memorial in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my son, my 31-year-old son, Marcus, walked up to the casket, looked down at it, and spit. Not a subtle thing. Not something you could mistake for a cough or a stumble. He leaned over, gathered it in his mouth, and let it fall right on the polished wood, right where the spray of white lilies met the brass nameplate that read, Diane Elaine Calloway, beloved wife and mother. My daughter Naomi gasped. My sister grabbed my arm. The pastor froze mid-prayer. And 200 people, friends, neighbors, colleagues, members of our church, sat there in stunned silence watching saliva drip down the side of my wife's casket. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't look at me. He just straightened his jacket, turned around, and walked back toward the parking lot like he was leaving a restaurant after a bad meal. I should have been furious. I should have chased him down. I should have done something, anything, that a father is supposed to do in that moment. But I didn't. Because 3 rows behind where Marcus had been sitting, a man I had never seen before was watching me. Gray suit, leather briefcase on his lap, wire-rimmed glasses, and he was holding a sealed white envelope with my wife's handwriting on it. Before I continue, I need you to understand something. I am not the kind of man things happen to. I'm a 63-year-old retired civil engineer. I spent 37 years designing stormwater systems for the city. I ate the same breakfast every morning. I drove the same truck for 11 years. I married 1 woman, raised 2 children, paid off 1 house, and planned to die in it. Diane and I were married for 34 years. She was the center of everything. The family, the finances, the holidays, the plans. She managed the household accounts. She organized our trust documents. She kept the family together when it wanted to fly apart, which, looking back, was more often than I realized. She died on a Tuesday, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in March, gone by September. 6 months of watching the sharpest woman I ever knew dissolve into morphine and silence. And I thought the worst part was over. I thought burying her was the end of the pain. I was wrong. Because that man in the gray suit? His name was Arthur Pennington. He was a lawyer. Not our family lawyer. Not anyone I'd ever heard of. And after the burial, after Marcus disappeared and Naomi was sobbing and the guests were shuffling toward their cars, Arthur Pennington walked up to me, extended his hand, and said 5 words that cracked my life wide open. Your wife hired me in April. April. 1 month after her diagnosis. 5 months before she died. She asked me to deliver this at the funeral, he said, and he held out the envelope. But not just to you, Mr. Calloway, to everyone. She left instructions. Very specific instructions. I stared at him. Instructions for what? A reading, he said. She called it her final letter. She wanted it read aloud today at the reception, in front of the family. I looked down at the envelope, Diane's handwriting, my name on the front, and beneath it, in her careful script, to be opened and read aloud at the family reception following my funeral. No exceptions. DEC. My hands were shaking. Mr. Calloway, Arthur said quietly, I should tell you, your wife also left me a box of documents, financial records, photographs, account statements, and a notarized deposition. She was very thorough. That word, thorough, that was Diane's word. She used it the way other people use love or family. To Diane, being thorough was the highest form of respect. It meant you cared enough to get it right. I looked back toward the casket, where two cemetery workers were waiting to lower it into the ground. My daughter was still crying. My sister was whispering to the pastor. And somewhere in the parking lot, my son was sitting in his car, having just spit on his dead mother. That's when I realized Diane knew. She knew something I didn't. She had known it for months, maybe years, and she had spent the last 5 months of her life, while cancer was eating her alive, building a case. Against whom? For what? I didn't know yet, but I was about to find out, and so were they. Let me go back. My name is Gerald Calloway. People call me Jerry. I was born in 1962 in a small town outside Raleigh, North Carolina. My father was a machinist. My mother worked at the county clerk's office. I was the middle of 3 kids. Nothing special, nothing tragic. I went to NC State, studied civil engineering, graduated in 1984, and got a job with the City of Charlotte's Public Works Department. I met Diane in 1989 at a church potluck. She was 25. I was 27. She was wearing a yellow dress and carrying a casserole dish that was too heavy for her, and I took it from her hands before she dropped it. She looked at me and said, "Well, you're useful." I laughed. She didn't. She was serious. That was Diane. Direct, practical, sharp in a way that could cut you if you weren't paying attention, but warm underneath if you earned it. She worked as an office manager for a mid-size accounting firm downtown. She was good with numbers, better than me, honestly, and she had a mind for organization that bordered on obsessive. We got married in 1991. Marcus came in 1994. Naomi came in 1997. We bought a 4-bedroom brick colonial in the Dilworth neighborhood, paid it off in 22 years. I drove to work every morning at 6:45. Diane drove the kids to school, then went to the office. We ate dinner together almost every night. That was our life. Ordinary, stable, the kind of life people don't write stories about, until they do. Now I need to talk about Marcus. Marcus was always different. Not in a way you could name when he was young, not a diagnosis, not a label, just different. He was charming when he wanted something, and cold when he didn't. He could make you feel like the most important person in the room, and then 10 minutes later, he'd look through you like you were furniture. Diane saw it before I did. She told me once when Marcus was about 16, "Jerry, that boy doesn't feel guilt. He performs it." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I thought she was being hard on him. I was wrong. She was being observant. Marcus was smart. Smart enough to get into UNC Chapel Hill. Smart enough to talk his way into a finance job in Atlanta after graduation. And smart enough to come back to Charlotte 3 years later, claiming he'd made some connections, and was starting his own consulting firm. I was proud of him. Diane was cautious. "What kind of consulting?" she asked him at dinner one night. "Business strategy," Marcus said. "Helping small companies restructure." Diane looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "That's very vague, Marcus." He smiled. "It's a broad field, Mom." She didn't smile back. That was 2020. Marcus was 26. Over the next 4 years, his consulting firm never seemed to have a website, an office, or any clients I could identify. But Marcus always had money. Not extravagant money. He wasn't buying sports cars, but enough to rent a nice apartment in South End, enough to wear good clothes, enough to never ask me for a loan. I didn't question it. Diane did. Quietly, in her way. Now let me talk about Naomi. because she matters to this story too. Naomi was the opposite of Marcus in almost every way. Quiet, careful, deeply empathetic. She became a social worker after college, worked with foster kids in Mecklenburg County. She didn't make much money, but she never asked for any. She visited us every Sunday. She called Diane 3 times a week. When Diane got sick, Naomi was the one who moved back into the house to help. She slept on the pull-out couch in the study for 4 months. She drove Diane to chemo. She organized the medications. She held her mother's hand during the bad nights when the pain was so intense that Diane would grip the bedsheets and whisper, "Make it stop. Make it stop." Marcus visited twice during the entire 6 months. Twice. The first time, he came for an afternoon, sat in the living room, talked about himself for an hour, then left before dinner. The second time, 2 weeks before Diane died, he showed up unannounced, went straight to the study where Diane kept her filing cabinet, and stayed in there for 20 minutes before coming out and saying he was just looking for some old tax documents. Diane was in bed that day, barely conscious. But when I told her Marcus had been in the study, she opened her eyes, really opened them, more alert than she'd been in weeks, and said, "Jerry, what did he take?" "Nothing," I said. "He was just looking for—" "Check the filing cabinet," she said. "Bottom drawer, check it." I went to the study. The filing cabinet was locked, same as always. The key was on Diane's key ring, which was in her nightstand drawer. I checked. The key was there. The cabinet was secure. Nothing seemed disturbed. I told Diane everything was fine. She closed her eyes, but she didn't relax. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. After I'm gone, don't let Marcus handle the estate. Not the house, not the accounts, not the trust. Promise me." I promised. I didn't understand why she was so insistent. I thought it was the medication talking, or the fear, or the pain. That was the first anomaly. The second came 3 days before she died. Naomi was in the kitchen making soup. I was sitting beside Diane's hospital bed. We'd set one up in the downstairs bedroom, holding her hand. She'd been drifting in and out for hours. Her breathing was shallow. The hospice nurse had told us it could be any day now. Then Diane opened her eyes and looked at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. It was like the fog just lifted, all at once. "The lawyer will come to the funeral," she said. "What lawyer?" I asked. "Arthur Pennington. I hired him in April. He has everything." "Everything? What are you—" "Don't read it before the reception, Jerry. It has to be in front of everyone, promise me." "Diane, I don't understand." "You will." She squeezed my hand. "I did the work, all of it. I was thorough." There was that word again, thorough. Then she closed her eyes, and she didn't open them again. Not really. She passed 2 days later, at 4:17 in the morning, with me on one side and Naomi on the other. I held her hand until it was cold, and then the machinery of death took over. The funeral home, the obituary, the flowers, the calls, the food that appeared on our doorstep in Tupperware containers. Naomi handled most of it. I moved through those days like a man underwater, doing what I was told, signing what needed signing, nodding when people said, "She's in a better place." Marcus showed up the day before the funeral. He walked in the front door without knocking, set his bag in the hallway and said, "We need to talk about the estate." I was sitting at the kitchen table. Naomi was beside me. We both looked up at him. "Marcus," Naomi said carefully, "Mom died 3 days ago." "I know that," he said, "but the house, the accounts, the trust. Someone needs to start dealing with it. I assume Dad's the executor?" We haven't even had the funeral yet, Naomi said. Marcus looked at her the way you look at someone who's being slow. I'm not being insensitive, Naomi. I'm being practical. There are time-sensitive things. Like what? I asked. He paused. Just a beat. Then he smiled. Like the bank accounts, Dad. Mom's name is on the joint accounts. If we don't move on that, the bank could freeze. I know how joint accounts work, Marcus. Another pause. Right, of course. I'm just trying to help. He went upstairs to his old bedroom. Naomi looked at me across the table. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The next morning, the morning of the funeral, I went into the study to get my black tie. And I noticed something. The filing cabinet. Bottom drawer. It was unlocked. I pulled it open. Inside, there were supposed to be folders. Diane's organized system, color-coded, labeled in her neat handwriting. Financial records, insurance policies, property documents, trust paperwork. Half of them were gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty spaces where the folders used to be. Green tabs for bank statements, blue tabs for insurance, red tabs for the trust. The red folder, the trust folder, was gone entirely. I closed the drawer. I locked it with the key from Diane's nightstand, and I went to bury my wife. I didn't say anything to Marcus. I didn't say anything to Naomi. I stayed calm. I needed to understand what was happening before I reacted. That was the morning of the funeral. The morning I thought was about grief. By that afternoon, I would learn it was about something else entirely. I should tell you about the funeral itself, because you need to see what happened before the spit, before the letter, before everything unraveled. The service was at Green Lawn Memorial Chapel, a beautiful stone building surrounded by old oaks draped in Spanish moss. Diane would have liked it. She loved old trees. 200 people came. Colleagues from her firm, neighbors, church members, her book club, my old co-workers from Public Works, family from both sides, my brother Dale and his wife from Raleigh, Diane's sister Lorraine from Savannah, cousins, aunts, old friends, and Marcus. Sitting in the front row with Naomi and me, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that looked brand new and expensive. His face was arranged in an expression of solemn grief. The right face for the right occasion, performed perfectly. The service was beautiful. Pastor Williams spoke about Diane's faith, her kindness, her sharp wit. Naomi read a passage from Ecclesiastes. Diane's best friend, Helen, told a story about the time Diane organized an entire neighborhood cleanup in 48 hours after a storm. I couldn't speak. I'd written something, but when I stood up and looked at the casket, the words just evaporated. I stood there for 10 seconds, maybe 15, and then I sat back down. Naomi took my hand. Marcus didn't volunteer to speak. Nobody asked him to. After the chapel service, we moved outside for the graveside ceremony. That's when I spotted Arthur Pennington for the first time. Gray suit, briefcase, third row. I didn't know who he was yet. I just noticed him because he was the only person there I didn't recognize, and because he was watching me with a kind of patient, deliberate attention that didn't match the occasion. Pastor Williams read the committal prayer. The honor guard from the funeral home stood at attention. The autumn wind pulled at the tent canopy. And then Marcus stood up. He walked to the casket. Everyone assumed he was going to place his hand on it, say goodbye, maybe finally show some emotion. Instead, he spit on it and walked away. The reception was at our house. Diane had planned it herself. Before the cancer took her voice, she'd written out a list. Caterer, flowers, table arrangements, playlist, even the napkins. She'd chosen cream-colored linen with a small embossed leaf pattern. That was Diane, thorough to the end. The house was full by 2 p.m. People moved through the rooms in that hushed, respectful way that funerals create. Quiet conversations, gentle touches on the arm, plates of food held but barely eaten. Marcus wasn't there. He'd driven away from the cemetery and hadn't come back. Naomi was in the kitchen, handling things, keeping busy so she wouldn't collapse. I was standing in the living room when Arthur Pennington appeared beside me. "Mr. Calloway," he said softly, "I understand this is an incredibly difficult day, but your wife's instructions were very specific about the timing." "The letter," I said. "Yes, she wanted it read at the reception, in front of the immediate family and at least 20 witnesses. She specified that Marcus, Naomi, and you must all be present. Marcus isn't here. Then we wait." I looked at him. "You're telling me my dead wife planned this down to the attendance list?" Arthur nodded slowly. "Mr. Calloway, your wife spent 5 months preparing for today. She knew exactly what she was doing. She told me, and I'm quoting, 'Jerry will want to skip this. Don't let him.'" That sounded exactly like Diane. "She also told me that Marcus would try to leave before the reading," Arthur continued. "She said, and again I'm quoting, 'He'll run. He always runs when he's about to be caught.'" Caught. That word hit me like a slap. "Caught doing what?" I asked. Arthur looked at me with something close to sympathy. "I think you should call your son, Mr. Calloway." I called Marcus. He didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third call, he picked up. "What?" "Marcus, come back to the house. I'm not sitting in a room full of people pretending Mom was a saint. There's a lawyer here. Your mother hired him. He has something to read. A letter. She wanted all of us present." Silence. "Marcus?" More silence. Then, "What kind of letter?" "I don't know. That's why I need you here." A long pause. "Fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 12. Marcus came through the front door looking different than he had at the cemetery. The performed grief was gone. In its place was something tighter, watchful, coiled, like an animal that's heard a sound it doesn't like. Arthur Pennington gathered us in the dining room. Me, Marcus, Naomi, my brother Dale, Diane's sister Lorraine, and about 30 other guests who were close enough to be considered witnesses. The caterers stopped serving. The playlist went silent. Arthur stood at the head of the table, Diane's chair, and opened the envelope. "This is a letter written by Diane Elaine Calloway on August 14th of this year," he said. "Approximately 3 weeks before her death. It was notarized in my office and witnessed by 2 independent parties. Mrs. Calloway requested that I read it verbatim, without interruption, in the presence of her family. She titled it, 'The Truth About My Family.'" He looked at me. I nodded. He began to read. "To my husband Gerald, my daughter Naomi, my son Marcus, and everyone gathered here today. If this letter is being read, then I am dead. I want you to know that I did not spend my last months in fear or regret. I spent them doing what I have always done, being thorough. Jerry, I love you. I have loved you for 34 years, and I will love you beyond this life. You are the most decent man I have ever known. That decency is your greatest strength and your greatest vulnerability, because it made you trust people who did not deserve it. Naomi, you are my heart. You gave up months of your life to care for me, and I will carry that gratitude wherever I go next. You are everything I hoped you would be. Marcus, Arthur paused. He looked up from the letter, glanced at Marcus, and continued. Marcus, I know what you've done. I've known for 2 years. I've spent the last 5 months gathering the proof. Everything is documented. Everything is notarized. And everything is in the hands of my attorney, Arthur Pennington, who is reading this letter right now. You have been stealing from your father and me since 2021. You forged my signature on 3 separate financial documents. You opened a secondary account at First Heritage Bank, using my Social Security number without my knowledge or consent. You redirected quarterly dividend payments from our investment portfolio, payments your father and I depended on for retirement, into that account. Over 3 years, you have taken $487,000. You told us your consulting business was successful. It doesn't exist. There is no business. There is no office. There are no clients. I checked. I had an investigator check. Your consulting income is our money, stolen and laundered through an LLC you registered in Delaware under a name that is not yours. You also attempted to alter our family trust. 3 months ago, while I was dying in my bed, you came to the house and removed the trust documents from my filing cabinet. You took them to a notary, one you had paid, and attempted to change the distribution terms so that you would receive 70% of the estate upon my death and your father's subsequent death, instead of the equal split I had designated. You failed, Marcus, because I had already moved the real trust documents to Arthur's office in April. What you took from the filing cabinet were copies, decoys I left there because I knew you would come for them. The altered trust you created is fraudulent and unenforceable. The real trust is safe, legal, and unchanged. I want you to know that I did not do this out of anger. I did it because your father deserves the truth, and because I could not die knowing you would continue to exploit him after I was gone. Everything I've described is supported by documents, bank records, and a notarized deposition from the private investigator I hired. Arthur has all of it. Copies have also been provided to our family attorney, Richard Morse, and to the fraud division of First Heritage Bank. I love you, Marcus. I brought you into this world, and I have grieved for the person you became. But love does not require silence, and a mother's final duty is not to protect her child from consequences. It is to protect the people her child would harm. To everyone else in this room, I am sorry you are hearing this today, at what should be a day of mourning. But I have learned, in my final months, that the truth does not wait for convenient timing. It comes when it is ready, and I have made it ready. Gerald, the house is yours. The accounts are yours. The trust is intact and exactly as we planned. Arthur will walk you through everything. You are taken care of. I made sure of it. Live well, be happy, and do not let anyone, not even our son, take what we built together. With all my love and all my thoroughness, Diane. The room was silent, not quiet, silent, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses on your chest and fills your ears. I was gripping the edge of the dining room table so hard my knuckles were white. Naomi had her hand over her mouth. Lorraine was crying. Dale was staring at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen on my brother's face, something between fury and disbelief. And Marcus. Marcus was standing near the doorway, and his face had gone through 3 changes in the time it took Arthur to read that letter. First, composure, the mask, the performance. Then recognition, the moment he understood what was happening. And finally, something raw and cornered, like a dog backed into a fence. He looked at me, not at Arthur, not at Naomi, at me. "Dad," he said, That's not true. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My wife's voice, Diane's voice, even through Arthur's reading, was still ringing in my head. I've known for 2 years. Dad, she was on medication. She was confused. You know how she was at the end. She wasn't thinking clearly. Someone fed her this. Someone manipulated her into Marcus. Arthur's voice was calm, professional, and absolutely firm. I have a box of documents in my car. Bank statements, LLC registration records, notarized copies of the forged signatures, and a 60-page deposition from a licensed private investigator. Would you like me to bring them in? Marcus turned to Arthur. Who the hell are you? I told you. I'm your mother's attorney. My mother's attorney is Richard Morse. Mr. Morse handles the family's general legal matters. Your mother hired me separately, in April, specifically for this. Arthur adjusted his glasses. She wanted independent counsel with no prior relationship to the family. She was very clear about that. Marcus looked around the room, 30 faces staring at him. Some confused, some horrified, some already understanding. He took a step backward. This is insane. I'm not standing here and... You can leave, Marcus, Arthur said evenly. But the documents exist regardless of whether you're in the room. And copies have already been sent to First Heritage Bank's fraud department. The process is underway. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at me one more time. I still hadn't spoken. Dad, he said. And for just a second, his voice cracked. Just a second. You can't believe this. I looked at my son, my firstborn, the boy I taught to ride a bike, to throw a football, to change a tire, the boy who grew into a man I didn't recognize. The filing cabinet, I said quietly. What? Bottom drawer. The trust folder. It's gone, Marcus. I checked this morning. His face went still, completely still. The mask, the performance, the charm, all of it just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. He turned and walked out of the house without another word. The front door closed behind him, and 30 people in my dining room exhaled at the same time. That night, after everyone left, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold 3 times. Naomi sat across from me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Naomi said, she knew. The whole time she was dying, she knew. She was protecting us, I said. She was protecting you, Dad. I looked at my daughter. She was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her black dress wrinkled from a day of standing and serving and holding people together. She'd been holding everything together for months. Did you know? I asked. About Marcus? Not the money, she said. But I knew something was wrong. Little things. He'd ask weird questions about your accounts, about the house value. Once, about a year ago, he asked me if I knew where Mom kept the trust documents. I told him to ask Mom. What did he say? He laughed and said he was just curious. But it didn't feel like curiosity, Dad. It felt like shopping. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there. Diane had put it in writing. Notarized. Witnessed. She'd hired a private investigator and an independent lawyer while she was dying of cancer, because she knew I wouldn't see what was right in front of me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed. Our bed, Diane's side still dented with the shape of her, and I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how my son had become a thief. At 3 a.m., I got up and went to the study. The filing cabinet was still locked. I opened the bottom drawer again and looked at the empty spaces. Green tabs for bank statements, those were still there. Blue tabs for insurance, also there. But the red folder, the trust, was gone. And now I noticed something else. A yellow folder, way in the back, that I didn't remember. I pulled it out. Inside was a single sheet of paper, in Diane's handwriting. Jerry, if you're reading this at 3 a.m. because you can't sleep, I know you well. The yellow folder is for you. Not for the lawyer, not for the public. Just you. There's more to this than the money. I didn't put it in the letter because it would have been too much for one day. But you need to know. Go see Arthur on Monday. Ask him about the second box. I love you. Now go back to bed. D. I sat in that study chair for an hour, holding that piece of paper, and I cried for the first time since she died. Not because of the betrayal, not because of the money, because my wife, even from beyond the grave, was still taking care of me. Still 3 steps ahead, still thorough. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep, but I went back to bed. Because she told me to. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Arthur Pennington's office was in a modest professional building on Providence Road, wedged between a dental practice and a financial advisor. Not flashy. Diane wouldn't have chosen flashy. Arthur met me at the door. He looked rested, professional, composed. He led me through a small waiting area into his office. Clean desk, law books on the shelves, a single framed print of the Blue Ridge Mountains. "How are you holding up, Mr. Calloway?" he asked. "I'm standing," I said. "That's about all I can promise." He nodded. "Your wife told me you'd say something like that." I almost smiled. Almost. "Diane mentioned a second box," I said, in a note she left in the filing cabinet. Arthur didn't look surprised. He stood, went to a closet behind his desk and pulled out a gray document storage box, the kind you buy at Office Depot. He set it on the desk between us. "This is what Diane called Phase 2, he said. "The letter at the funeral was Phase 1, the public disclosure, establishing the facts, creating witnesses, putting Marcus on notice. Phase 2 is the deeper investigation." "Deeper how?" Arthur opened the box. Inside were labeled folders, USB drives, printed photographs, and a thick document bound with a binder clip. "Your wife hired a private investigator named Sandra Nguyen in April. Ms. Nguyen spent 4 months investigating your son's financial activities. What she found went beyond the $487,000 that was detailed in the letter." He pulled out the bound document. "This is Sandra's full report, 147 pages. I'll summarize the key findings, and then you can read it at your own pace." I nodded. My mouth was dry. "First," Arthur said, "the Delaware LLC. It's registered under the name Pinnacle Strategy Group. The registered agent is a mail forwarding service in Wilmington. The sole member is listed as M. David Calloway. Marcus used his middle name and your last name, which is technically his legal name, but the combination was designed to obscure his identity on paper." Go on. "Through Pinnacle Strategy Group, Marcus opened a business checking account at a bank in Delaware. He used this account to receive the redirected dividend payments from your investment portfolio, a portfolio managed by Greystone Financial here in Charlotte. The dividend payments were set up as automatic transfers. Marcus accessed the Greystone portal using your wife's login credentials." "How did he get her login?" "Sandra's investigation suggests he obtained them from Diane's laptop. Your wife kept a password file, encrypted, but Marcus apparently had access to her computer at some point. Diane discovered the unauthorized login activity in January of 2023 when she noticed a discrepancy in the quarterly statement. She initially thought it was a bank error." I remembered that. Diane had mentioned it. She'd said the quarterly dividend payment seemed low. I'd told her to call Greystone. She'd said she would handle it. She handled it all right. When Diane investigated further, Arthur continued, she discovered the redirect. She didn't confront Marcus immediately. Instead, she began quietly documenting everything. She contacted Greystone and requested detailed transaction logs. She discovered that the redirect had been in place since September of 2021. 3 years, I said. He was stealing from us for 3 years. Yes. The total amount redirected was $487,000, as stated in the letter. But Sandra's investigation uncovered additional activity. He pulled out another folder. Inside were bank statements, dozens of them. Marcus also took out a personal loan in 2022, using your home as collateral. The room tilted slightly. What? He forged your signature, and Diane's, on a loan application with Southeast Regional Credit Union. He obtained a home equity line of credit for $150,000, secured against your property at 418 Magnolia Drive. That's our house. He used our house? He made interest-only payments for about 18 months, then stopped. As of last month, the outstanding balance, including penalties and accrued interest, is approximately $168,000. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Are you telling me there's a lien on my house? There was. Diane discovered it in May, shortly after she hired Sandra. She immediately retained a fraud attorney, separate from me, who contacted Southeast Regional and initiated a dispute. Because the signatures were forged, the lien is being challenged. The process is ongoing, but the bank's internal investigation has already confirmed that the signatures on the loan documents do not match your known signatures or Diane's. I sat back in my chair. $487,000 in redirected dividends. $168,000 in a fraudulent home equity loan. My son had stolen more than $650,000 from us, from me and Diane, while we were sleeping, while we were having Sunday dinners, while she was dying. There's one more thing, Arthur said. I looked at him. I wasn't sure I could take one more thing. He pulled out a photograph. It was a screenshot of a text message exchange between 2 phone numbers. One was Marcus's, the other was unlabeled. The messages read, Marcus, she's getting worse, probably weeks now. Unknown. Good. Once she's gone, the old man won't check anything. He doesn't even know the password to Greystone. Marcus, I know. I need the trust changed before she dies, though. If she dies with the current terms, Naomi gets half. Unknown. Can you get to the documents? Marcus. I'll go to the house this week. She's too out of it to notice. Unknown. Make sure you use Delgado for the notary. He doesn't ask questions. Marcus. Already set up. I stared at the screenshot. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything. Mr. Calloway, Arthur said, the unknown number belongs to a woman named Vanessa Hargrove. She's Marcus's girlfriend. But more importantly, she's a former employee of Greystone Financial, the firm that manages your investment portfolio. I looked up. She worked at Greystone. Until 2020, she was a client services coordinator. She would have had access to client login portals, security questions, and account structures. Sandra believes Vanessa provided Marcus with the access he needed to initiate the dividend redirect. This isn't drama, I thought. This is a scheme, a system, designed, planned, and executed by my own son and a woman I'd never heard of. Diane had seen it. Diane had mapped the whole thing, and she'd done it while dying. What do? I asked Arthur. He folded his hands on the desk. Diane anticipated that question. She left instructions, a plan, essentially. She called it Phase 3. How many phases are there? For the first time, Arthur smiled, very slightly. Your wife said, and I quote, "As many as it takes." Phase 3 was the counterattack. But it wasn't loud or angry or dramatic. It was quiet, methodical, and devastating, exactly the way Diane had designed it. Arthur walked me through the steps Diane had outlined. First, secure all remaining assets. The investment portfolio at Greystone needed to be transferred to a new account with new credentials, new security questions, and two-factor authentication that Marcus couldn't bypass. Arthur had already begun this process with Diane's authorization before she died. A new financial advisor had been assigned, a woman named Catherine Park, who was aware of the situation and had been briefed by Sandra Nguyen. Second, file a formal fraud complaint with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Sandra's report, along with the forged documents and bank records, constituted sufficient evidence for a criminal referral. Diane had wanted me to make the decision about whether to pursue criminal charges. She hadn't wanted to take that choice away from me. Third, confront Marcus with the full evidence in a controlled setting. Not at home, not in public, but in Arthur's office with a witness present and the option to involve law enforcement if Marcus became hostile. Fourth, and this was the one that made me close my eyes and sit very still for a long time, Diane had revised the family trust. The original trust had split the estate equally between Marcus and Naomi. The revised trust, executed in April with Arthur as the witness and filed with the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds, gave everything to Naomi. Every cent. The house, the accounts, the investments, the life insurance payout. Marcus received nothing. Not as punishment, Diane had written in a separate note attached to the trust revision. As protection. For Jerry. For Naomi. And honestly, Marcus, for you. Because every dollar I leave you is a dollar that enables you to continue being the person you've become. And I won't do that. I love you enough to cut you off. I sat in Arthur's office for 2 hours that morning. I read Sandra's report. I looked at the bank statements, the forged signatures, the LLC documents, the text messages, the photographs of Marcus entering and leaving the Southeast Regional Credit Union branch on the day the fraudulent loan was signed. And slowly, piece by piece, the picture came together. My son was a con man. Not a struggling kid who'd made a mistake. Not a troubled young man who needed guidance. A deliberate, calculating con man who had systematically looted his parents' finances while smiling at Sunday dinners and performing the role of a successful professional. The consulting firm didn't exist. The apartment in South End was paid for with our money. The nice clothes, the new car, the restaurant meals, the vacations I'd seen on his social media, all of it was funded by theft. And the woman, Vanessa Hargrove, had provided the access and the expertise. She knew how financial systems worked. She knew where the vulnerabilities were, and she and Marcus had exploited them together. What I found made my stomach drop, but it also made something else happen, something I didn't expect. It made me angry. Not the wild, explosive anger of a man who's been surprised. A different kind. Cold, focused. The kind of anger that sits down, reads every document twice, and makes a plan. Diane had given me the blueprint. Now I had to execute it. The next 2 weeks were the most difficult of my life. Not because of the grief. The grief was constant, a low hum beneath everything, like tinnitus of the soul. But because I had to move carefully, deliberately, and quietly, while my son was out there somewhere trying to figure out his next move. And Marcus was moving. I knew that because Sandra Nguyen, the private investigator, was still on the case. Diane had prepaid Sandra's services through the end of the year. Sandra was a former FBI forensic analyst, 52 years old, short, no nonsense, with a voice like gravel and a mind like a filing cabinet. She came to see me at the house on Wednesday, 2 days after my meeting with Arthur. "Mr. Calloway," she said, sitting at my kitchen table with a laptop open in front of her. "Your son made 3 phone calls to Vanessa Hargrove in the 24 hours after the funeral. He also visited the Southeast Regional Credit Union branch on South Boulevard on Monday morning." "What for?" "He tried to access the home equity line of credit. He was told the account was frozen pending a fraud investigation. He left the bank, visibly agitated." "And the Greystone account?" "He attempted to log in to the portal on Sunday night, approximately 16 hours after the funeral. The login credentials had already been changed. He tried 4 times before being locked out." I stayed calm. I needed proof, more proof. Proof that would hold up in court. Proof that would protect me and Naomi. Proof that Diane's work would not be wasted. "What else do you have?" I asked Sandra. She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a photograph. Surveillance quality, taken from across a parking lot. Marcus and a woman I didn't recognize were standing beside a white SUV. The woman was blonde, mid-30s, attractive in a sharp, angular way. "That's Vanessa Hargrove," Sandra said. "This photo was taken yesterday, outside a storage facility on Brookshire Freeway, Unit 114. Marcus rented it under the Pinnacle Strategy Group name." "What's in it?" "I don't know yet. I don't have legal authorization to access it. But I can tell you that Marcus visited this unit 4 times in the past 2 months. Twice while your wife was still alive. A storage unit. Rented under the fake company name. Visited during Diane's final weeks." "There's something else," Sandra said. She pulled up another image. This one a scanned document. "This is a copy of a second trust document. Not the real one and not the decoy your wife left in the filing cabinet. This is a third version, allegedly created by your wife, that names Marcus as the sole beneficiary of the entire estate." I felt my chest tighten. "That's a forgery." "Almost certainly. The notary stamp on this document belongs to a man named Raymond Delgado, the same notary referenced in the text messages between Marcus and Vanessa. Mr. Delgado operates out of a small office in Pineville. He has 2 prior complaints with the North Carolina Secretary of State for improper notarization practices." "Where did you get this document?" "Marcus submitted it to your family attorney, Richard Morse, yesterday morning. He told Mr. Morse that Diane had given it to him before she died and asked him to hold it. He said it superseded the original trust." I closed my eyes. He was still going. Even after the funeral. Even after the letter. Even after being exposed in front of 30 people. Marcus was still trying to steal the estate. "What did Richard Morse do?" I asked. "Mr. Morse called Arthur Pennington to verify. Arthur informed him that the genuine revised trust was already on file with the Register of Deeds, executed in April, and that any subsequent document was fraudulent. Mr. Morse has placed a hold on all estate proceedings until the matter is resolved." I opened my eyes. "Sandra, can you prove this third trust is forged?" "Yes. The notary date is June 15th. Your wife was in hospice care on that date and had not left her bed in 3 weeks. The document claims to have been signed in Diane's presence at Mr. Delgado's office. We have medical records, hospice logs, and GPS data from your wife's phone, which she kept on her nightstand. confirming she was at home. GPS data from her phone, I repeated. Sandra nodded. Your wife thought of everything, Mr. Calloway. She asked me to preserve the GPS logs specifically because she anticipated Marcus would try to create a forged document with a date when she was supposedly well enough to travel. She was right. That's when I noticed something. A pattern. A thread that ran through everything Diane had done. She hadn't just gathered evidence. She had predicted Marcus's moves. Every single one. The theft of the filing cabinet folders. She'd left decoys. The attempt to alter the trust. She'd already moved the real one. The fraudulent third trust. She'd preserved the GPS data that would disprove it. The login attempts. She'd already changed the credentials. Diane had been playing chess while Marcus played checkers, and she'd done it from a hospital bed, with 6 months to live, while the rest of us were focused on saying goodbye. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was in awe. On Thursday, I went to see the house. My house, 418 Magnolia Drive. I walked through every room. The kitchen where Diane cooked 1,000 meals. The living room where we watched movies on Friday nights. The study where she kept her filing cabinet. The bedroom where she died. I stood in the doorway of that bedroom for a long time. Then I went to the garage and opened the safe. It was a small floor safe, bolted into the concrete, that Diane and I had installed when we first moved in. Inside were our passports, our birth certificates, the kids' social security cards, and a few pieces of Diane's jewelry. I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Underneath the jewelry box, there was a small manila envelope. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were two things, a USB flash drive and a handwritten note. Jerry, the USB has recordings. I wore a small recorder during Marcus's visits starting in January. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. Everything on this drive is legal. Listen to the recording from February 8th first. That's the one that matters. I went inside. I got my laptop. I plugged in the USB drive. There were 7 audio files, each labeled with a date. I clicked on the one from February 8th. The recording quality was surprisingly clear. Diane must have had the recorder close by, maybe in her bathrobe pocket or on the nightstand. Marcus's voice. Mom, I just need to know what the trust says. That's all. Diane's voice, thin but steady. Why? Because Dad's not going to be able to manage things on his own after you're gone. You know that. He doesn't understand finances. Your father understands more than you think. Come on, Mom. He's a civil engineer. He designs drains. I'm the one in finance. I should be managing the estate. You're not in finance, Marcus. A pause. Then, what's that supposed to mean? It means I called 3 of your supposed clients last month. None of them have ever heard of Pinnacle Strategy Group. A long silence. You're checking up on me? Marcus's voice had changed. The warmth was gone. Flat. Cold. I'm dying, Marcus. I'm checking on everything. So what? You think I'm lying about my business? I think you're lying about a great many things. Another pause. Then Marcus's voice again, lower. You don't know what you're talking about. The medication is keeping me alive long enough to protect your father from you. That's what the medication is doing. I heard Marcus exhale, then footsteps, a door opening and closing. The recording ended. I sat at the kitchen table and I pressed play on the next file, and the next, and the next. 7 recordings, 7 conversations. A map of my son's deception, captured in his own voice. In the January 4th recording, Marcus asked Diane where she kept the passwords to the financial accounts. She told him they were in the filing cabinet. This was a test, I realized. She already knew he'd been accessing the accounts and wanted to see if he'd ask again. In the January 19th recording, Marcus mentioned Vanessa for the first and only time. He said she was a financial consultant who could help organize things. Diane asked for her full name. Marcus gave it. Diane said, "I'll look into her." Marcus said, "Don't bother, Mom. She's just a friend." In the March 3rd recording, made just days after Diane's diagnosis, Marcus's tone was different, softer, almost gentle. He told Diane he loved her. He told her he was sorry about the diagnosis. And then, in the last 30 seconds, he said, "Mom, if anything happens, I just want you to know, I'll take care of Dad. I'll handle everything. You don't have to worry." Diane's response, "That's exactly what I'm worried about, Marcus." Friday morning, I called Arthur Pennington and told him I wanted to proceed with Phase 3. All of it. The police report, the bank complaints, and the confrontation. "Are you sure?" Arthur asked. "This means potential criminal charges against your son." "He stole $650,000 from my family," I said. "He forged documents. He took a loan out against my house. He tried to alter the trust, and he did it while his mother was dying. I understand. I just need you to be certain." "Arthur, my wife spent the last months of her life building this case instead of spending that time in peace. I'm not going to waste her work." There was a pause on the line. Then Arthur said, "She told me you'd say that too." The following Monday, Sandra Nguyen and I went to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. We sat in a conference room with a detective named Anita Bowen, a no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s who listened to our summary, looked through the evidence binder Sandra had prepared, and said, "Mr. Calloway, your wife was a better investigator than half my team." I almost laughed. Almost. Detective Bowen took the case. She said the evidence was substantial. Forged signatures, unauthorized account access, fraudulent loan applications, and the phony trust document would all be examined. She also said she'd coordinate with the bank's fraud teams and the North Carolina Secretary of State's office regarding the notary, Raymond Delgado. "One question," she said. "Your son, does he know you've gone to the police?" "No." "Good. Let's keep it that way for now." I left the police station feeling something I hadn't felt since Diane died. Purpose. They thought I was finished. I wasn't. That week, Arthur set up the confrontation meeting. He contacted Marcus through a neutral channel, a certified letter sent to Marcus's apartment, informing him that, as the executor of Diane's estate, which was me with Arthur as the legal representative, we needed to meet to discuss estate administration matters. Marcus called Arthur's office within an hour of receiving the letter. "What estate matters?" Marcus demanded. "My mother left a trust. I have a copy. I'm the sole beneficiary." "Mr. Calloway," Arthur said calmly, "the document you submitted to Richard Morse has been identified as fraudulent. The genuine trust, executed by your mother in April, is on file with the Register of Deeds. I suggest we meet to discuss your options." "My options? What the hell does that mean?" "It means you should bring a lawyer, Marcus." The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at Arthur's office. Marcus agreed to come. He said he'd bring his own attorney. In the meantime, I did something I hadn't done yet. Something I'd been putting off because it felt like the hardest part. I went to see the storage unit. Sandra had obtained a court order to access it, based on the evidence that Pinnacle Strategy Group was a fraudulent entity used in the commission of financial crimes. A locksmith opened the unit while Sandra, Detective Bowen, and I watched. Inside was a small space, maybe 10 by 10, and it was full. There were filing boxes stacked 3 high along one wall, a desk with a laptop, a small safe, and on the desk, in a neat pile, were the folders from Diane's filing cabinet. The ones I'd noticed were missing. Red tabs, the trust documents, or rather, the copies Diane had left as decoys. But the boxes were what mattered. Sandra opened them one by one. Inside were financial records going back 5 years, bank statements for the Delaware LLC, printouts of wire transfers, copies of the forged loan documents. And this was the one that made Detective Bowen whistle under her breath. A second laptop, partially open, with a browser still logged in to a cryptocurrency exchange. He was converting some of the stolen funds to cryptocurrency, Sandra said, looking at the screen. This exchange account has a balance of approximately $94,000. I looked around the storage unit, my son's secret office, the nerve center of his 3-year theft operation. Everything organized, everything labeled. He'd inherited that from his mother, I realized with a sickening twist. Can we use all of this? I asked Detective Bowen. Every bit of it, she said. Court-ordered search, chain of custody maintained. This is solid, Mr. Calloway. I stood in that storage unit, and I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there. The anger was still there. But something else was growing now. Something like clarity. Diane had known exactly who Marcus was. She'd accepted it. She'd planned for it. And she'd given me everything I needed to protect myself and Naomi. The next morning, something was different. I woke up, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for Diane's side of the bed. I got up. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and I wrote a letter to my son. Not an angry letter. Not a legal letter. A father's letter. I told him I loved him. I told him I was filing criminal charges. I told him the storage unit had been searched and the contents seized. I told him the cryptocurrency account had been flagged. I told him the home equity line of credit was being reversed and that the forged trust document had been reported to the Secretary of State. And I told him that his mother had given him everything: love, opportunity, education, and that he had chosen to repay it with theft. I didn't send the letter. Not yet. Arthur said to wait until after Thursday's meeting. Thursday, Arthur's office, 2 o'clock. Marcus arrived with a lawyer, a young guy in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Kyle Burgess. Marcus was wearing the same charcoal suit from the funeral. He looked thinner than I'd seen him. His eyes were harder. On our side, me, Arthur, Sandra Nguyen as a consultant, and Richard Morse, our family attorney, who had come as a witness and to confirm the status of the trust. We sat on opposite sides of the conference table. Arthur had arranged the evidence binders in the center, 4 of them, labeled and indexed. Marcus looked at the binders. His jaw tightened, but he sat down. Arthur opened the meeting by reading a prepared statement summarizing the evidence. The redirected dividends, the forged loan, the fraudulent trust document, the LLC, the storage unit, the cryptocurrency account. As Arthur spoke, I watched Marcus. His face went through stages: irritation, calculation, composure, then a kind of resigned stillness. His lawyer, Kyle, was scribbling notes furiously. When Arthur finished, he said, "Marcus, you have 2 options. Option 1, cooperate fully. Return the stolen funds. We have a detailed accounting, consent to the dissolution of Pinnacle Strategy Group, and agree to a repayment plan for the home equity balance. In exchange, your father will consider whether to proceed with criminal charges or defer to a civil resolution. Option 2? Kyle asked. Option 2. We proceed with the criminal referral, which is already in progress with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. Detective Anita Bowen has the case. The evidence package has been submitted. If Marcus chooses not to cooperate, the criminal investigation moves forward with no further offers. Kyle leaned over and whispered to Marcus. Marcus listened, then shook his head. This is extortion, Marcus said. It's accountability, I said. It was the first time I'd spoken directly to him since the funeral. He looked at me, and for just a moment, just a flicker, I saw something underneath the mask. Fear? Shame? I couldn't tell. Dad, you don't understand what happened. Vanessa, she pressured me. She had access, she knew how to do it, and she... Don't, I said. My voice was quiet, but it stopped him cold. Don't blame someone else. Your mother recorded your conversations, Marcus. I've heard the tapes. You asked for the passwords. You asked about the trust. You asked about the accounts. You, not Vanessa. His face changed again. The realization that I had the recordings, that Diane had recorded him, hit him like a physical blow. He actually leaned back in his chair. She recorded me? North Carolina is a one-party consent state, Arthur said. The recordings are legal and admissible. Marcus looked at his lawyer. Kyle's face was carefully neutral, but I could see it in his eyes. He was recalculating. His client was in much deeper trouble than he'd been told. Can we have a moment alone with my client? Kyle asked. Of course, Arthur said. We stepped into the hallway. Sandra, Arthur, Richard, and me. He's going to take option 1, Sandra said flatly. Maybe, Arthur said, but he'll try to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate, I said. Arthur looked at me. Your wife said you'd say that too. She said a lot of things. She did. She also said, and I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you this. She said, when Jerry stops being sad and starts being angry, that's when he'll be ready. That's when he'll be the man I married. I stood in that hallway and let those words settle into me. 10 minutes later, Kyle opened the door and said Marcus was ready to talk. We went back in. Marcus was sitting with his hands flat on the table, and his face was different now. Stripped down, raw, the mask was off, not because he'd chosen to remove it, because there was nowhere left to hide. I'll cooperate, he said. But I want to know, did Mom really think I was... He stopped, started again. Did she hate me? I thought about the note in the trust revision. I love you enough to cut you off. No, I said. She didn't hate you. She loved you enough to stop you. Marcus looked down at his hands, and for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I saw something genuine on my son's face. It wasn't remorse. Not yet. But it was the beginning of understanding that the game was over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the next morning, Marcus disappeared. I called his phone. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I called his apartment building. The front desk said Mr. Calloway had checked out at 6 a.m. with 2 suitcases and a garment bag. I called Arthur. Arthur called Kyle Burgess. Kyle said Marcus had told him he was going to clear his head and would be back by Monday. I called Sandra. Sandra checked the flight manifests. He booked a one-way ticket to Miami, she said. Delta departing at 7:15 a.m. He's already in the air. Miami, where Vanessa Hargrove had family, according to Sandra's report, Where the weather was warm, the banks were friendly, and extradition paperwork took time. "He's running," I said. "He's trying to," Sandra said. "But Mr. Calloway, your wife anticipated this too." "Of course she did." "What do you mean?" "Diane included a contingency in her instructions to me. If Marcus attempted to flee the jurisdiction after the evidence was presented, I was to immediately notify Detective Bowen and activate a financial hold on all accounts associated with Pinnacle Strategy Group and Marcus David Calloway. The paperwork for the hold was prepared in August, before your wife passed. It just needed Detective Bowen's signature. And? I called Detective Bowen 20 minutes ago. The hold is being processed. Marcus's personal checking account, the Delaware LLC account, and the cryptocurrency exchange account are all being frozen as we speak. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "Hi, Sandra. How far ahead did my wife think?" "Far enough," Sandra said. "She told me once during one of our meetings, she was in the hospital bed, hooked up to the IV. She said, 'I know my son. He'll cooperate until he thinks he can escape. Then he'll run. People like Marcus always run. Make sure there's nowhere to go.'" I closed my eyes. Diane, my wife, dying of cancer, planning a financial siege from a hospital bed, predicting her own son's behavior with the accuracy of someone who'd spent 30 years studying him. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We wait," Sandra said, "and we let the system work." The system worked. Marcus landed in Miami at 11 a.m. By 2 p.m., his debit card was declined at a restaurant in Coral Gables. By 3 p.m., he tried to withdraw cash from an ATM and was denied. By 4 p.m., he called Kyle Burgess in a panic. Kyle called Arthur. Arthur called me. "Marcus wants to come back," Arthur said. "He says he'll cooperate fully, no conditions." "He said that yesterday, too." "I know, but this time Kyle is recommending he surrender voluntarily to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department." Surrender. Detective Bowen has issued an arrest warrant. Forgery, identity theft, fraud, larceny by trick. 4 counts total, with the possibility of additional charges related to the home equity loan. I sat with that for a long moment. An arrest warrant. For my son. "When?" I asked. "Kyle is arranging for Marcus to fly back tomorrow morning. He'll surrender at the police station Friday afternoon." "Okay." "Mr. Calloway, Jerry, are you all right?" "No," I said, "but I'm doing what Diane asked me to do." Let me tell you about what happened next, because this is where the story turns in a direction I didn't expect. A direction that even Diane, with all her thoroughness, might not have predicted. On Friday morning, while I was waiting for Marcus to fly back to Charlotte, Naomi came to the house. She'd been staying with a friend since the funeral. She needed distance, she said, and I understood. But she came back that morning with a look on her face that I recognized immediately. It was the look Diane used to get when she'd figured something out. "Dad," Naomi said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "I need to show you something." She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a Facebook profile. The name read V. Hargrove. The profile picture was the blonde woman from Sandra's surveillance photos, Vanessa. "I've been looking into her," Naomi said. "I know Sandra investigated her, but I found something Sandra might have missed." "What?" Naomi scrolled down the profile. "Look at her friends list. Specifically, look at this person." She pointed to a name. Raymond Delgado. "The notary," I said. "Right. But look at his profile." She clicked through. Raymond Delgado's Facebook page was sparse. A few photos, mostly of fishing trips and car shows. But in one photo, dated 2 years ago, Raymond was standing at a barbecue grill with his arm around a man I didn't recognize. "Who is that?" I asked. "That," Naomi said, "is Patrick Hargrove, Vanessa's brother." "They're connected through the brother?" "It gets deeper. Patrick Hargrove works at Southeast Regional Credit Union." The room went very quiet. "The bank where Marcus took out the home equity loan," I said. "Yes. Patrick works in the loan processing department. I called the bank yesterday, pretending I was applying for a loan, and asked about the process. The person I spoke to confirmed that Patrick Hargrove processed home equity applications." I stared at my daughter. "Naomi, how did you—" "I'm a social worker, Dad. I investigate family fraud and exploitation every day. This is literally my job." She was right. Naomi worked with elderly abuse cases, financial exploitation cases, cases where families preyed on their own. She'd seen this pattern before. She just hadn't expected to see it in her own family. "There's one more thing," she said. She pulled up another screen, an email she'd forwarded to herself. "I submitted a public records request to the North Carolina Secretary of State for all notarizations performed by Raymond Delgado in the past 3 years. The results came back this morning." She turned the laptop toward me again. On the screen was a spreadsheet, a list of notarized documents. "Raymond Delgado notarized 14 documents for entities associated with Marcus or Vanessa in the past 2 years," Naomi said, "including the fraudulent trust, the LLC registration for Pinnacle Strategy Group, and, this is the one that got me, a power of attorney document, dated last year, granting Marcus David Calloway power of attorney over Gerald Raymond Calloway." I felt the blood drain from my face. A power of attorney? Over me? It was never filed with any court or institution. I think it was a backup plan. If everything else failed, Marcus could have used this document to take control of your finances directly. Using a forged signature. Notarized by his girlfriend's brother's friend. Naomi closed the laptop. "Dad, this wasn't just Marcus. This was a ring. Marcus, Vanessa, Patrick, Delgado, at least 4 people were involved." I looked at my daughter, 28 years old, fierce and brilliant, and so much like her mother that it made my chest ache. "Your mother would be very proud of you right now," I said. Naomi's eyes filled. She'd say I was being thorough. Yes, she would. I called Detective Bowen immediately. She listened to the new information about Patrick Hargrove and the power of attorney document, and she said something that told me the case was about to get much bigger. "Mr. Calloway, this sounds like an organized fraud operation. Your son may be the principal actor, but if Hargrove and Delgado were facilitating the crimes, they're co-conspirators. I'm going to bring this to the DA's office." By that afternoon, the case had been escalated. The Economic Crimes Unit opened a broader investigation into what they were now calling a family exploitation ring. Marcus, Vanessa Hargrove, Patrick Hargrove, and Raymond Delgado. Marcus arrived back in Charlotte on Friday evening. He surrendered at the police station at 5 p.m. Kyle Burgess was with him. He was booked, photographed, and released on $50,000 bail, which Kyle arranged through a bondsman. I wasn't there for the arrest. I didn't need to be. Arthur had arranged for me to receive a notification when it was done. At 5:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Arthur. He's been processed. Out on bail, next hearing in 2 weeks. I was sitting on the back porch, the one Diane loved, the one where she used to sit with her coffee in the mornings, watching the birds at the feeder she'd hung from the oak tree. I looked at the feeder. It was empty. I hadn't refilled it since she died. I got up, went to the garage, got the bag of birdseed and filled it. Then I sat back down and waited. The next 2 weeks were a strange kind of limbo. The legal machinery was turning, but slowly. Detective Bowen was building the expanded case. Arthur was finalizing the estate paperwork. The bank fraud investigations were proceeding at their own bureaucratic pace. Marcus was out on bail, living with Kyle Burgess. His lawyer had apparently taken him in, which told me Kyle was either very loyal or very worried about his client fleeing again. Either way, Marcus was restricted to Mecklenburg County and required to check in with a pretrial services officer. He called me once during that period. I almost didn't answer. Dad. Marcus, can we talk? Not about the legal stuff, just talk. I thought about it. No, I said. Not yet. Dad, please. Marcus, every conversation we've had for the last 3 years has been a lie. Every visit, every phone call, every "I love you, Dad" was camouflage for what you were doing. I can't sit across a table from you right now and pretend that a conversation is going to fix this. Silence. I'm going to be at the hearing, I said. I'll see you there. I hung up. It was the hardest phone call of my life. Harder than the one from the hospice nurse. Harder than the one to the funeral home. Because saying no to your child, even when your child is a grown man who stole from you, goes against every instinct a father has. But Diane's voice was in my head. Don't let him handle the estate. Don't let anyone take what we built. She hadn't just meant the money. She'd meant my sense of self, my dignity, my ability to stand up straight and say, this was wrong, and I won't pretend otherwise. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. Arthur and I arrived early. Naomi came too. She'd taken the day off work. The courtroom was a standard setting. Dark wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the seal of North Carolina on the wall behind the judge's bench. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a room where consequences happened. Marcus was brought in by his lawyer. He looked different, thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, no tie. He looked, for the first time in his life, like a man who didn't have a plan. Kyle Burgess had filed a motion to reduce bail and argued that Marcus was cooperating. The assistant district attorney, a sharp, crisp-voiced woman named Carla Reyes, countered with the new evidence regarding the Hargrove siblings and Delgado. Your Honor, Reyes said, the defendant is not a solo actor. He is the central figure in a coordinated fraud operation that targeted his own parents, involved at least 3 co-conspirators, and resulted in documented losses exceeding $650,000. The forged power of attorney document suggests the defendant had plans for further exploitation that were only prevented by the victim's wife's independent investigation. The judge, an older man named Thomas Whitfield, listened carefully. He reviewed the evidence summary. He asked Marcus if he understood the charges. Marcus stood up. Yes, Your Honor. Do you have anything to say at this time? Marcus glanced at Kyle. Kyle nodded slightly. Your Honor, Marcus said, and his voice was steady but thin. I take responsibility for what I've done. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want the court to know that I intend to cooperate fully and make restitution. Judge Whitfield looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I was sitting in the gallery, 2 rows back. Mr. Calloway, the judge said, addressing me, do you wish to make a statement? Arthur had told me this might happen. I'd prepared something, but when I stood up, I didn't use my notes. Your Honor, I said, my wife died 6 weeks ago. She spent the last 5 months of her life, while she was dying of pancreatic cancer, investigating and documenting her own son's crimes against us. She did this because she knew I wouldn't see it. She knew I trusted him. She knew that trust would be exploited after she was gone. I paused. The courtroom was quiet. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because my wife asked me to be. She asked me to protect what we built together, and she asked me to hold our son accountable, not because she didn't love him, but because she did. She loved him enough to believe he could face the truth. I looked at Marcus. He was looking at the table in front of him. I don't know if he can, I said, but I'm giving him the chance. That's all Diane asked for. I sat down. Naomi took my hand. Judge Whitfield set the bail at $100,000, increased, not reduced, and ordered Marcus to surrender his passport. He scheduled a preliminary hearing for 6 weeks out and noted that additional charges related to the co-conspirators were anticipated. As we left the courthouse, Marcus tried to approach me in the hallway. Kyle held him back, but Marcus called out, "Dad, the letter. Mom's letter. What she said about the money, about the trust. She was right about all of it. But she was wrong about one thing." I stopped walking. "She said I don't feel guilt," Marcus said. "She was wrong." I looked at him. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. I didn't say anything. I turned and walked out of the courthouse with Naomi and Arthur beside me. Because I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But Diane's voice was in my head. That boy doesn't feel guilt. He performs it, and I'd spent 31 years mistaking the performance for the real thing. Over the following weeks, the case expanded exactly as Detective Bowen had predicted. Vanessa Hargrove was arrested at her apartment in Miami on a fugitive warrant. She was extradited to North Carolina and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Patrick Hargrove was arrested at his home in Charlotte. He was charged with bank fraud and conspiracy. Southeast Regional Credit Union immediately terminated him and launched an internal audit of every loan he'd processed. Raymond Delgado, the notary, was arrested at his Pineville office. His notary commission was revoked by the Secretary of State, and he was charged with multiple counts of fraudulent notarization. 3 arrests in 10 days. The local news picked it up. Not the Charlotte Observer's front page, but the crime section ran a story with the headline, "Charlotte man accused of defrauding dying mother, co-conspirators arrested." I didn't read it. Naomi did. She told me the article was factual and fair, and that it mentioned Diane's investigation as the catalyst for the case. "Mom made the news," Naomi said, with a small, sad smile. She'd hate that," I said. "She'd pretend to hate it. She'd secretly love being called a brilliant private citizen investigator." I laughed. For the first time in 2 months, I laughed. But the case wasn't over yet, and neither was the drama. Because 3 days after the arrests, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was a woman's. "Mr. Calloway, my name is Janet Hargrove. I'm Vanessa's mother." I almost hung up, but something in her voice, a trembling, exhausted quality, stopped me. "What do you want, Mrs. Hargrove?" "I want to apologize, and I want to give you something." "Give me what?" Vanessa kept a diary on her laptop. She told me about it before she was arrested. She said if anything happened, I should read it, so I read it. I waited. "Mr. Calloway, the diary goes back 3 years. It describes everything, the plan, the accounts, the meetings with your son, and it describes something else, something that isn't in the police reports." "What?" There's a second property, an investment property in your wife's name, or rather, in a forged version of your wife's name. Marcus and Vanessa purchased a condominium in Wilmington, near Wrightsville Beach, using funds from the Pinnacle account. They put it in the name D.E. Calloway to make it look like one of your family's assets. The condo is worth approximately $380,000. I felt the floor shift under me again. A condo, in Diane's name, purchased with stolen money. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because my daughter did a terrible thing, and I didn't raise her to be this person. I can't undo what she did, but I can make sure you know the full scope of it." I thanked her. I called Arthur. Arthur called Sandra. Sandra confirmed the property within 48 hours. A 2-bedroom condo at a Wilmington beach complex, purchased through Pinnacle Strategy Group in the name of D.E. Calloway 14 months ago. The total scope of Marcus's theft was now approaching $1 million. The redirected dividends, the home equity fraud, the cryptocurrency, and now a beachfront condo. My son, who had never seemed to work a day in his life, had built $1 million portfolio using my money, my wife's money, our retirement, our security, and a stranger, the mother of one of his co-conspirators, had given me the final piece. Detective Bowen added the property to the case. The condo was seized as a proceed of fraud. The total documented losses were now $1,031,000, just over $1 million. The preliminary hearing was approaching. Arthur told me that the DA's office was offering Marcus a plea deal. Plead guilty to 2 felony counts of fraud and 1 count of forgery, cooperate fully in the prosecution of the co-conspirators, and agree to full restitution. In exchange, the DA would recommend a sentence of 3 to 5 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. If Marcus rejected the plea and went to trial, he was facing up to 15 years. Kyle Burgess called Arthur and asked for a meeting, just Marcus and me. No lawyers. He said Marcus wanted to talk to his father, face to face, before making the decision. Arthur advised against it. So did Sandra. But I said yes, because Diane's letter said she loved Marcus, and I still did too, even after everything. We met at a coffee shop on East Boulevard. Neutral ground, a weekday morning. The place was half empty. Marcus was already there when I arrived. He was sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He stood when he saw me. "Dad." "Sit down, Marcus." We sat. The November sun was coming through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air. A normal morning, an impossible conversation. "I'm going to take the plea," Marcus said. "He's good. I wanted you to know that before I say what I need to say." "Go ahead." He looked at me, and I saw it. Underneath the charm, underneath the mask, underneath the calculation, I saw the boy. The 5-year-old who crawled into bed with us during thunderstorms. The 10-year-old who cried when his goldfish died. The kid who was there before whatever went wrong. "I don't know when it started," he said. "The lying, the taking. I don't know if it was something that happened to me or something that was always in me, but I know it was wrong. I've known it was wrong the whole time, and I did it anyway." "Why?" He shook his head. "Because I could. Because it was easy. Because you and Mom trusted me, and I used that trust like a credit card." He pressed his hands flat on the table. "Now Vanessa made it easier, but she didn't make me do it. That was me, all of it." I sat with that. "Your mother recorded you, Marcus. I heard the tapes. I heard you asking for the passwords. I heard you lying to her face while she was dying. He flinched, actually flinched. I know. She spent her last months building a case against you instead of spending them in peace. Do you understand what that means? She used her dying days on you. Not on rest, not on goodbyes, not on the things that mattered to her. On catching you. I know, Dad. No, you don't. Because here's the part that breaks my heart, Marcus. She didn't do it for revenge. She did it because she loved me too much to leave me unprotected. She looked at her own death and said, "When I'm gone, Marcus will come for Jerry." And she was right. Marcus's eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. I couldn't tell if it was real or performed, and I realized I might never be able to tell. Not with Marcus, maybe not ever, but it didn't matter. Because this wasn't about Marcus's feelings. It was about mine, and Diane's, and Naomi's, and the truth. Take the plea, I said. Cooperate, pay back what you can. And maybe, in a few years, we can talk about what comes next. You do that? After everything? Your mother would want me to leave the door open. Not wide, not now, but open. Marcus wiped his eyes. He nodded. I stood up. I put my hand on his shoulder, just for a moment. And then I walked out of the coffee shop. The plea hearing was held 3 weeks later. Marcus stood before Judge Whitfield and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony fraud and 1 count of forgery. He gave a full allocution, describing the scheme in detail, naming the co-conspirators, and acknowledging the harm he'd caused. The courtroom was not packed. It was not a spectacle. But the people who mattered were there. Naomi, Arthur, Sandra, Detective Bowen, and about a dozen family members and friends who had been at the funeral, who had heard Diane's letter, who had witnessed Marcus spit on his mother's casket. Carla Reyes, the ADA, read a victim impact statement that I had written. In it, I described not the financial loss, though that was devastating, but the loss of trust. The loss of the son I thought I had. The loss of my wife's final months, which should have been spent in peace, but were instead spent in investigation. Judge Whitfield listened. When the statement was finished, he looked at Marcus. Mr. Calloway, the judge said, your mother appears to have been a remarkable woman. She built a case against you that most law enforcement agencies would envy. She did it while terminally ill. She did it because she loved your father enough to protect him from his own son. That fact should weigh on you for the rest of your life. He sentenced Marcus to 4 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 2. He ordered full restitution, $1,031,000, to be paid from the seized assets, including the Wilmington condo, the cryptocurrency account, and any other recoverable funds. The remainder would be structured as a long-term repayment obligation. Vanessa Hargrove later pleaded guilty to conspiracy and received 2 years. Patrick Hargrove received 18 months. Raymond Delgado received a year and lost his notary commission permanently. Marcus was taken into custody immediately after sentencing. As the marshals led him out of the courtroom, he turned and looked at me. He didn't say anything. He just looked, and I looked back, and I held that gaze until the door closed between us. 3 months later. Winter in Charlotte is mild, but that year it felt colder than usual. Maybe it was just me. The house was quiet, quieter than it had ever been. No Diane in the kitchen, no phone calls from Marcus, just me and the birds at the feeder, and the sound of the furnace kicking on and off. Naomi came by every Sunday, same as always. She'd bring groceries, cook dinner, sit with me on the back porch even when it was too cold for it. We'd talk about work, about her boyfriend, a quiet, steady man named James who taught high school history, about nothing in particular. One Sunday, she brought a box of Diane's things from the downstairs bedroom. We'd been slowly going through them, clothes to donate, photos to keep, books to distribute among friends. In the bottom of the box, under a stack of sweaters, Naomi found a small leather journal. Diane's handwriting, neat and precise, covering dozens of pages. It was a diary. Not a daily one. Diane wasn't that type. It was more like a record of thoughts, organized by topic rather than date. There were entries about recipes she wanted to try, books she'd read, arguments she'd had with me that she wanted to process before bringing them up. And there was a section near the end, written in a slightly shakier hand, labeled simply, "For After." Naomi and I read it together. "Jerry, by now you've seen the evidence, heard the recordings, and hopefully filed the charges. I'm sorry I couldn't do this in person. I thought about telling you while I was still alive, but I knew you. I knew you'd confront Marcus immediately without proof, and he'd deny everything and gaslight you into believing you were wrong. He's good at that. Better than you know. So I waited. I built the case, and I gave it to Arthur, because Arthur doesn't love Marcus. Arthur will follow the evidence, not the emotion. I needed someone like that in your corner. I also wanted you to hear it in front of people. Not to humiliate Marcus, though God knows he's earned it, but because you need witnesses, Jerry. Witnesses who will stand by you when Marcus tries to rewrite the story. And he will try. He'll say I was confused. He'll say the medication affected my judgment. He'll say I was manipulated. He'll say anything to make you doubt what's right in front of your face. That's why I was thorough. Not for the court. For you. So that when the doubt creeps in, and it will, you can open the binder, look at the evidence, and remember that your wife was in full command of her mind until the very end. I don't know what will happen to Marcus. I hope he goes to prison, not because I want him to suffer, but because consequences are the only language he speaks. And I hope that somewhere in that experience, he finds the thing I could never give him. A reason to be honest. But if he doesn't, if he comes out the same as he went in, then you have to protect yourself, Jerry. Don't let guilt turn you into a victim. Don't let love blind you again. Keep Arthur close. Keep Sandra on retainer. And trust Naomi, because she is the best of both of us. I'm going to stop writing now because my hand hurts, and I want to go sit on the porch and listen to the birds. That feeder better be full when you read this. All my love, all my thoroughness, and all my faith in you. Diane. I put the journal down. Naomi was crying quietly beside me. I put my arm around her, and we sat there for a long time, in the house that Diane had protected, surrounded by the life she had built. The feeder was full. I'd been keeping it full since the day after the courthouse. The following spring, the financial recovery was nearly complete. The Wilmington condo sold for $392,000. The cryptocurrency was liquidated at $87,000. The home equity line was formally voided by Southeast Regional after the bank's investigation confirmed the fraud. Catherine Park, the new financial advisor, helped me restructure the investment portfolio to recover the lost dividends over time. The total recovery would eventually reach approximately $780,000. Not the full million, but enough. Enough to keep the house. Enough to rebuild the retirement fund. Enough to breathe. Arthur handled the estate administration flawlessly. The trust was executed exactly as Diane had designed it. Everything to me during my lifetime. Then to Naomi after my death. The house, the accounts, the insurance, the investments, all of it protected. Marcus wrote me a letter from prison. just 6 months into his sentence. It was short. Dad, I think about Mom every day. I think about what she did. Not the investigation, but the fact that she used her last months on me. On protecting you from me. I don't know how to carry that, but I'm trying. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I've earned it. But I want you to know that I hear her voice in my head now, the way you probably do. And it's not the angry voice. It's the one that says, "Be thorough, Marcus. For once in your life, be thorough." I'm trying to figure out what that means for me. Your son, Marcus. I read the letter 3 times. I put it in the yellow folder in the filing cabinet, the one Diane had left for me, and I locked the drawer. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Or maybe one day, when the wound wasn't quite so raw. But I kept the letter, because Diane would have kept it, and because even in the wreckage of what Marcus had done, there was something there. A seed, a possibility, a sentence that sounded less like performance and more like a person. Be thorough, maybe that was enough. A year later, I was sitting on the back porch. Sunday afternoon, February. The air was cool, but the sun was warm on my face. The bird feeder was full. Naomi and James were inside, making dinner. I could hear them laughing about something, the way young couples do when they don't know anyone's listening. I was holding Diane's journal, not reading it, just holding it, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the weight of everything she'd done. People ask me sometimes, friends, neighbors, people at church, how I got through it, how I handled the betrayal, the loss, the legal battles, all of it at once. They expect me to say something about faith or resilience or inner strength, but the truth is simpler than that. I got through it because Diane didn't leave me alone. She died, yes, but she didn't leave. She left the evidence. She left the plan. She left the journal, the recordings, the letters, the lawyer, the investigator, the witnesses. She left a system, a thorough, comprehensive, bulletproof system designed to carry me through exactly the storm she knew was coming. And the lesson, if there is a lesson, isn't about revenge. It isn't about catching the bad guy or winning the case or getting the money back. The lesson is this: love isn't just a feeling. It's a verb. It's the work you do when the feeling isn't enough. It's staying up late to organize evidence when you can barely hold a pen. It's hiring a lawyer from a hospital bed. It's predicting your son's next move because you've spent 30 years studying him and using that knowledge not to condemn him, but to protect the people he would hurt. Diane loved me with action. Every document, every recording, every carefully placed decoy. That was love. Thorough, relentless, unglamorous love. The kind that doesn't make for a good greeting card, but builds a life and defends it. I miss her every day. I miss her voice, her sharpness, her stubbornness, the way she'd look at me over her glasses when I said something she thought was foolish. I miss the weight of her beside me in bed. I miss the sound of her pen on paper. But I don't miss her the way you miss someone who's gone. I miss her the way you miss someone who's just in the other room, because she's everywhere. In the filing cabinet, in the journal, in the bird feeder, in the trust documents, in the lawyer's office, in the police reports, in the architecture of the safety she built around me. She was thorough. God, she was thorough. And I was loved. Naomi called me to dinner. I closed the journal, set it on the side table, and went inside. The table was set for 3. Naomi had made pot roast, Diane's recipe from the journal. The smell filled the house. James was opening a bottle of wine. We sat down. We said grace. We ate. And the house was not quiet anymore. Now I want to ask you something. If someone you loved was hiding a truth from you, not to hurt you, but to protect you, would you want to know? And if you found out, would you be grateful for the truth or angry about the silence? I've thought about that question every day for a year. I still don't have a clean answer. But I know this. Diane chose the truth. She chose it knowing it would break my heart. She chose it knowing it would destroy my relationship with my son. She chose it knowing it would overshadow her own funeral. And she was right. Because the truth, ugly, painful, inconvenient, is the only foundation strong enough to rebuild on. Everything else is sand. So if you're holding a secret that protects someone you love, think about Diane. Think about what she did with her last months on Earth. Think about the bird feeder, and the filing cabinet, and the letter at the funeral. And then, be thorough. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone, or taught you something, or just kept you listening, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it. Leave a comment. Tell me your story, because everyone's carrying something, and sometimes the heaviest things are the ones we carry for the people we love. Thank you for listening. This was my story, Diane's story, our story, and every word of it is true.